Welcome to Module 2, Lecture 2. Today we are going to discuss about characteristics, nature, scope of and principles of planning. Okay, and in the first lecture we discussed about the definition of planning and types of planning and certain challenges of the planning. Now we are going to barriers of the planning. Now today we are going to discuss about the characteristics, nature, scope and principles of planning. Okay, we will begin with the characteristics of planning. As we said, planning is the basic and primary functions of management. We also should need to understand the characteristics of the planning. Why we need to understand? Because when we are getting into a management role or managerial roles, it is important that you understand the characteristics of the planning, so that you don't miss out the important aspects in the planning, so that you are comprehensively add knowledge to the organizations when they are making the plannings ready. Okay, we will see one by one. Planning is continuous. Why planning is continuous? Planning always prepared for a specific period of time, but at the end of the particular period, then the next plan is already on. So now next set of planning is happened subsequently, then that set of plans are on, so that based on the new requirement or the given situations how we are going to move forward as an organizations, the next planning is already on, that next set of goals are already devised to the organizations or the people who are going to be in the organization. So that's why planning is a continuous process. It is not a one-time process where you make a plan and then you sit idle for next 10 years, so all is going to be smoothly happening. No. So planning is always a continuous process. Why? It is also one more reason is that as we have discussed in the previous lecture, planning also requires some contingency approaches, right? So what we decided, we need to ensure that we are going in a right direction. Let's say that if all of a sudden, because of the government policy or the new regulations has come up, so you need to make a quick changes to the planning. So that is also important. Why we are saying planning is always a continuous activity, it's not a one-time activity as such. And planning is flexible, and planning is always an exercise for an expected result in the future, which is uncertain and unpredictable, because we are only foreseeing or forecasting with our anticipation that we are making a best estimation or inferences about the future. But if you look at any future course of action which are uncertain, unpredictable. Why we say unpredictable? Of course, with a lot of estimations or mathematical modeling, we are applying the principle, statistics and other things, we are able to try to reduce the error, but still the business environment is always unpredictable, uncertain. The volatility is very high, so as a result there is always a scope to modify as per the changing situation. Let's say we anticipated something that let's talk about let me take an example of a mobile phones what we use, right? So when the feature phones are which only very basic phones, then mobile industry as they thought that okay, so it is going to be different. Now we are coming up with different types of smartphones have come up, the applications are increasing now with the wide usage of the smartphones, and now companies are always come up with the new plans. Now let's say the RAM size is increasing, storage size is increasing, and if you look at it, every month you happen to see that there is a quick change. Previously people never talked about a selfie. Now people are so fond of taking selfies. Now see, the plans is changing. Now people have to spend, previously only the main camera's pixel is very high. Now because people are so fond of taking selfies, now companies are coming up with a new plan, right? The plan has changed. It's flexible. So I said increase the pixel range high in the front camera as well, right? That's a classic example that I can say planning is flexible. As an organization, you cannot be rigid, right? Things are changing based on the situations. You need to quickly make the changes so that you are actually being competitive, continue to be competitive in the business environment, and that is very important, right? In any business environment, we need to ensure that we are as competitive, as realistic possible, and as futuristic also. So that's why planning should be flexible. Then planning ensures efficiency. Planning always takes the decisions or the goal based on the available resources, and the moment they know what are our available resources, what are our limitations, the planning always ensure that we are making a better efficient processes or the sequences in which we are able to achieve the results or desired goals with the limited use of the resources or with whatever the available resources we have. The planning actually increases your efficiency in managing your business as well. So planning ensures the efficiency, because it all talks about utilization of the resources in an effective way. Let's say I have only few manpower is left with me, but I am having a job in hand that I need to deliver certain quantities of the product to my customer. So when I know that I have only few people left with me to produce the product, then what do? I effectively plan it. Okay, how we are going to they may plan like long work hours, or let's say rotational shifts. So there are effective ways in which we are able to utilize the resource. That's why planning actually ensures the efficiency. It will decide how we need to plan it accordingly. Then planning is a basic function. So as we said, we are reinstating it again, reaffirming the fact that planning is the basic and primary functions of the management. Unless planning is happening, no subsequent actions of the management can come into picture. So there is no planning, there is no goals being set, then you cannot talk about staffing, controlling, directing, or whatever we are talking about other functions of management. When you are having a goals being set, that becomes a standard, or that becomes the measurable standard, right, to against which we can also see, are we progressing or not, are we deviating from our goals or not. If you are deviating, then you direct them, you are showing your control, so that we are making sure that we are on track again towards the goal. So that's why planning is a basic functions of the management, and planning is a key of decision making. When we're talking about planning also tells me the goals. Of course it is saying the goals, but it also tells me what kind of a decision I make, because planning also talks about looking at alternate possible ways of making things happen, and then alternate choices. Then against the alternatives, we are choosing a best alternative, best possible way. Then it is actually influencing the decisions and how it has to be done. For example, we are saying utilizing the limited resources. It also tell me how you can make a better decision. If let's say planning tells me, okay, you are only left with few resources, then your decision should ensure that how we can optimize using the limited resources, constrained resources. So when actually planning will drive how the decision has been made, and it is actually decision is also part of the planning process, because it will actually drive me, for example, forecasting, decision making in terms of to setting the targets, goals for the year, target for the year. So it is also a decision making. So planning is also engaging the decision making processes. Okay, planning is the future course of action. As we said, planning decides the future course of action. Planning will tell me, okay, what are my goals, what are my set targets. So based on that, it will tell me how I need to plan my activities, who has to do what and where, who by whom. All that is being done. It is actually a future course of actions. Planning is always futuristic oriented, because it tells me how I am going to be there in the upcoming months or the year. Okay, then planning is goal oriented. Planning is always made for achieving the desired objectives of the organization. As every organization exists for a particular reason, right? Every organization would have their missions and the visions, then translating into goals. Planning actually helps me to how to achieve the organization missions, how we are able to achieve the mission of the organizations. So it is actually making in terms of the goals, translating the mission to goals. Then it is actually helping an organization to plan their activities so that they are able to achieve their mission statement through achieving the goals, right? So it is also goal oriented. Then planning is an intellectual process. Planning and decision making, most often it is an intellectual process, because it is not like operational level where you are talking about sometimes some activities might require physical and other aspects of it, but when you're talking about planning, it is most often it is an intellectual process. It requires the application of skills and knowledge you learned, and where you need to talk about forecasting things, sometimes quantitative, sometimes qualitative forecasting, gathering information, knowledge about the business, knowledge about the existing policies, government regulations, rules. You need to have a lot of intellectual thought process, and it's always an intellectual exercises, because you need to collate every information, debate around the informations available, organize the knowledge, so that you are able to make a successful planning. Okay, yeah. then planning is an independent exercise. Planning involves a collective action of a different department. Now, every department is collectively involved in making a decision, but organized with an independent integral exercise. Sometimes it is also an independent. How it has been decided, though it will tell me how each department has to work, but it is an independent exercise. People independently do this exercise, collating the knowledge, as I said, comprehensively understanding the business domain, the existing situation, socio-political, economical perspective, and the demand from the customers, my specific industry, specific domain knowledges, then they will make an independent decision of it. But when they are making an independent exercise, but they will also consider the resources existing in the organization. They take a stock of the organization in terms of all perspectives, but it is an independent exercise. It is not the lower level people, or let's say functional departments will say this has to be done. No, planning always an independent exercise, but they will always take the inputs before in hand, but it is an independent exercise. Planning considers limiting factors. Planning is mainly based on organizational objective, which are attained as per stipulated time and resource limited for the same. Okay, why? Because planning has to be done for a specific defined period of time. It is also sometimes time constrained one, the similarly resource constrained things are there in the place. So planning always considers some limiting factors. It cannot always wait till get the comprehensive informations collectively, because if there is a time constraint, you need to quickly make your decision and planning has to be done, then you may not able to wait till the time you get everything ready, right? So it's sometimes based on the limited factors you will have to make the planning. Planning creates coordination. How planning will create coordination? Because planning will tell me, okay, these are the goals set, and it also tell me how we are going to achieve the goal. The moment we are saying how we are going to achieve the goals, it tells me how different functional areas, or how different teams or the projects or the different people in the organization has to work to achieve the goal. So it is actually creates the coordination between the team. For example, let's say once we decide on the plan, then it will tell me, okay, accounting department need to look after the financial perspectives, then you have to, then operational department. So operational department will tell me what kind of a material I can buy and what quality of the material I buy. Then the accounts department will say, see, come on, you need to understand this is my available resources in terms of financial terms. This is the budget I have available for the sourcing of the materials. Then operational department will think about, okay, how much of inventory I can hold. If my budgeting department, my finance department says I have only this much of the amount available for the procuring materials, then operational department will think that rather than going for holding a lot of inventories, they will plan very efficiently that whenever based on the need basis they will procure the materials. So now it is actually creating a coordination, right? So this is how we need to understand how planning actually creates the coordination. Now planning is the precision of actions. Planning will tell me what kind of activities are planned to be taken up is made in a precise way to have a clear picture on it. It actually takes a precisely plans, okay, this is how we are going to do our activities, so that now we are actually going to achieve the targets or the goals being set. Okay. Yeah. Now we will see the nature and scope of planning. Okay. So managing some of the important scopes of the planning is managing risk and uncertainty. Now managing risk is essential to bring out the success of an organization. Why sometimes unforeseen events occur which require to deal immediately. In doing all this, need of planning is gradually increasing. Okay, so managing risk and uncertainty is very important. Scope of planning comes into a place where we are every organization always try to reduce the uncertainty, right? So how do we reduce the uncertainty, or how do we manage the risk? Planning becomes an important player. How? Because let's say when we are engaging in planning, we will always do a lot of analysis in terms of all different perspectives. As I was saying, you will consider the macroeconomic situations, microeconomic situations, on the organization level, political level, or intra-country relationship, multinational level. For example, World Trade Organization might make some decisions. European Union, let's say for example, if your company is serving to an European Union clients, then if the European Union is making some policy changes or decisions, it might create a lot of uncertainty. So there are a lot of things involved. When you're how do you reduce this uncertainty? When planning goes that effectively trying to study, create the knowledge basis, considering all the perspectives and bringing those perspectives when you are making your forecasting, when you are making your predictions, how I can plan my activity, then it is actually some way it is trying to reduce the uncertainty. Next way, that for example, you plan something and you are into the business and you started producing something, all of a sudden you see that unforeseen events are occurring, then planning comes. How quickly you have to plan, reshape yourself to respond to the unforeseen events. So that is also important, right? How quickly you come back and shape up yourself to respond to the unforeseen events. And that is why planning is important. How quickly short term plans, we are talking about a range, right, on based on the time, short term range plans, you quickly make a short term range plan so that you are responding towards the unforeseen events or uncertainties you are talking about. Then building teamwork and cooperation. Planning promotes team building, spirit of cooperation, because once the plan is done, it is always at the higher level, right? So I say I have created a set of goals, or I set the target ready, and now it has to be communicated, and you expect people to work in tandem, and coordination should be seamlessly planned so that we are collectively approaching towards the goal. Because you cannot have teams work independently, not connected with each other, not coordinating, they are working on a competition principles, not on the cooperation principle, then it is impossible for you to achieve the goals of the organization. That's why planning actually will tell me, okay, it will create a scope, how do we build, who has to be cooperated to whom. For example, let's say after the planning, then it will say from 1 to 2 and 2 to 3, and it will say okay, from let's say from 2 to 6 there should be a coordination. How the planning will tell me how we need to be connected with each other, all these numbers. So it will also tell me creating a coordination between these teams, between these different departments, between these functional areas. Let's say operation department works independently without the support of the human resource. But imagine, so let's say in the shop floor, let's say I am planning for producing this number of products on a day. Then there is a demand from the customer says I need to accelerate the demand, accelerate my supplying capacity. Then they say to every time I need to supply him 100 units per day. Imagine, that's I am giving an example. Then all of a sudden my customer says from next week onwards you need to send me 500 units per day. Now the volume is increasing. The moment volume is increasing, operation department has to increase the production, right? How do they increase? Unless the manpower is sufficient. Now there needs a coordination between the human resource department and the operation department. Now operation department has to work in tandem with the human resource department and place the requirement that okay, now we have 50 people in place, we are producing 100 units. Now based on that calculations, we look at whether we need to increase, we need to have 200 more people so that we are able to continue to produce 500 units because my customer demand is increased. So that's how planning is actually going to create building teams and cooperation between the functional areas. And planning actually contributes towards creating quality of work. Planning helps organizations to get a realistic view of their available resources and objectives decided to fulfill. Okay, because planning actually considers all different possible informations, right? The available resources, what are my limited resources, the realistic situations in my organizations. Considering all that constraint or the limitations within the organization, the planning will always give me the best possible way to achieve my desired goals. So it will actually focuses on the quality of work to be done so that we are actually able to move towards our set goals. Okay, better use of time frame. Planning is always designed with a set of tasks to be taken in a particular time frame. Okay, so maintaining my time and resource allocations are preconditions to obtain success of planning at the desired level, right? Because in every planning there is an answer when the plan is to be undertaken. It is always a time bound, there is a set time period and time frame within which we will work on it. So it will also take resource allocations has to be done within the defined time period. So it is a better use of time frame is one of the scope for the planning. Resources. Planning is drafted to avoid overlapping of resources as well as to make work done in a cost effective way. Planning actually engages in saying let's say avoid repetitive jobs, or let's say overlapping of resources, repetitive process, or a more number of processes instead of reducing if there is a potential to have less number of processes. So planning actually tells me plan better way. For example, critical path method analysis, or the PERT we are talking about, the project management, project evaluation review technique. Critical path method will actually decide me what are the ways in which I can achieve my end goal, and finding the best possible method to do how within a less time frame, less number of processes, how I can actually optimize way of working things. So planning actually helps in planning the resources also. Okay, yeah. Now we will go and understand the principles of planning. We have seen the principles of management. We also talked about principles of flexibility, acceptance, efficiency, innovation, and reflective thinking in the module 1. Now we will focus on the principles of planning, specifically principles of commitment. In the lecture 1, we also talked about the commitment from the management, right? So the principles of commitment is important. People who are engaged in the planning has to have the commitment towards the planning, providing their insights, sharing their knowledge, and giving the available inputs to the decision making, which are all very important. The commitment of the people engaging in the planning activities is very important. That's the principle of commitment comes the first one. The principle of contribution is to ensure that the purpose of planning effectively achieved with a contribution from all concerned. We need to ensure that contribution comes from all different functional areas, from all sections of the organization, so that planning is very effective. Okay, and principles of navigational change. As we were saying, we cannot have a rigid planning, or we cannot have a single plan for the whole year or 5 years. So we should always have a periodic review. There should be a scope in the planning that there is a possibility of periodic review. When the periodic review is done, we should always see if there is a scope for improvement. Organization actually should create that avenue scope within the planning, there where you can actually make changes to the existing planning itself. For example, I say I made a plan, so no more changes in the planning, then it cannot be the way. There should be a review. Once the review is done, let's say something is not working out, maybe we anticipated that sequence of 1 2 3 4 will work, but later when we are operationally seeing, then we realize that 1 2 3 4 is not working, A B C D is working better. So that periodic review should actually help you to change the plan, revise the existing plan, and say okay, replace 1 2 3 4 to A B C D, right? So you need to have the scope for that. And principles of coordinated planning. All sub plans are coordinated, and the main planning of the organization is prepared as usual practice. So when we have the main plan, then we'll have the sub plans to every department will also, as we say, functional level planning will happen. So what is the important thing? We need to ensure that sub plans are actually in alignment or parallelly are going to relate with the main plan. For example, and as an organization we plan something, now the functional teams has to make the planning to make it operational, right? When they're making that plan, it has to be go hand in hand. It cannot be like say my organization plan is this and my functional plan is this, and if both goes in a different direction, then you cannot achieve. So it should be a coordination, and there should be a sync between the main plan and the sub plans. Okay, yeah. Principles of continuity. As we began this lecture with the we are talking continuous planning is a continuous process. So planning is always a continuous process, but of course it is subject to some modification based on the constraint of time and constraint of resources, but it is always a continuity. Principle of continuity is there. The planning is a continuous process. When one plan ends and the next plan is already in place, it has to support the continuous activity. And as I was saying, there is in any businesses, changes are inevitable. It is always likely to happen. Uncertainties are more, volatility is increasing. So then as plan should also be continuous process. Keeping in mind what are the changes are happening parallelly, then absorb those uncertainties and then quickly make the plan. So the planning should be a continuous activity. It should not be a one-time activity. Principles of timing. In every organization, plans are arranged in a time-bound manner. There should be a specified time period, right? I cannot have a plan which are not time-bounded, right? Every plan should be a time-bounded one. Then otherwise it will become a redundant plan. Some plan which are not applicable to this particular time period, then what is the use of the plan? It becomes redundant, not relevant at all. Okay. Principle of promising plan. Planning is related to the future course of action, so that it is based on several assumptions and promises to achieve. It has to actually give me the promising perspective for me, the future of the organization, right? It has to give me a promising scope that this is what we are going to do, envisioning the future. So planning should give a promising plan right now. Okay, come on, we have seen this, we are going to reach to this level. So that actually giving a promising scope for people to be motivated. The planning should motivate people, because sometimes unrealistic things which will actually demotivate people. For example, let's as an organization, let's say you are a 500 crore company, you might think of becoming a 1,000 crore company. Yes, it is sensible, possible, but sometimes you say, okay, we are 500 crore company this year, next year I want to become 10,000 crore company. Then imagine the people at the team leadership level, they will be shattered looking at how come we can make the company which is 500 crore company in a 1 year time to become a 10,000 crore company, and that will actually demotivate it, right? You should have some promising plans where it should be very realistic. People will be motivated looking at the plans. Okay, principle of framework. It deals with the policy framework that governs the functions of the organization for achieving it. You need always, planning should always create a framework that will actually going to guide the actions to be taken, or the direction of the course of actions. So that should be a framework should be provided, so that we know within which framework we should work. Otherwise, what will happen? People will move out of the framework, and then they started to contribute, and then it is going to reduce the course of action. Okay, and principle of limiting factor. As we said, sometimes the planning might consider only the limited informations, which will actually result in making some decision based on the incomplete informations. For example, let's say I wanted to predict future course. Let's say I wanted to, one company is discussing, should I increase one more plant or not? Now that is the point of discussion, and to make the decision whether I should start a one more plant, now I need to go back and understand my history and my potential customer segmentations, my demand for the particular product in the market, and who are my suppliers, my competitors. You need to do a complete analysis. And for example, if you're not considering all that and you are making some decision that okay, let us start a one more plant, let us see how we will survive in the business. Then with the limiting factors, if you make the decision of starting a new plant, maybe sometimes with the unexpected things, you might do really well, but most often if you are failing not to considering all these factors before you making a decision, then you are investing huge cost and starting a new plant, but there is no demand, you are not able to scale up your business, then you are going to fail. Okay, so that's why principles of limiting factor, sometimes the planning happens with the limited informations due to the time constraint as well. Okay, limitations of the planning. Planning creates rigidity. Sometimes when the plans are set, people never allowed to modify it. It becomes strict rules you follow, and whatever has been given to it in planning, so it creates a lot of rigidity. It will not give you some scope for creativity or innovation. People will feel like yes, there is a rule that I need to follow, I cannot make my own contributions. And planning does not work in dynamic situation. When you are, as we aligning with the previous point, rigidity and planning does not always work in a dynamic situation. Now if you see, business is always a dynamic things, right? It is uncertainty is very high. VUCA world we are talking about, there is always likely changes, and the demand and the volatility and uncertainty is really high. You cannot have a strict framework. You need to be, planning should also be dynamic in nature. And planning reduces creativity. Yes, of course, when there is a rigidity and the planning is set, then it is not allowing you to bring your perspective or add your value to the existing planning, then it is actually restricting your creativity or innovations in the workplace. People will ask to follow with the predetermined the ways it has to be done. And planning is sometimes time consuming process. People spend a lot of time, take a lot of time in planning it. By the time they plan and make their action, the things would have changed. So what we are planning for something, then by the time you come, let's imagine that I want to launch a smartphone with a 2 GB RAM and then 32 GB disk. Then by the time I planned and then implemented, my competitor already introduced some 8 GB RAM processor. So imagine time consuming process, it will actually impact also. Okay, then planning does not ensure success. Planning, it is not necessarily to ensure success. Planning will tell me how needed to do it, and how I'm going to set the goals, and how we need to coordinate activities to achieve the goal, but it not necessarily assures you that you will be successful. Planning is actually gives you a direction and which will going to guide you how you need to work, but it is not guaranteeing that you will definitely succeed, right? So sometimes it will neglect the real work or efficiency, and maybe failing to consider certain important inputs when we are making the planning. So planning will not necessarily provide you the success, okay, unless it has been effectively implemented. Okay, planning boosts a false sense of security. So managers mostly becomes careless and think that the main task will be done by the subordinates. This attitude actually creates problem on future actions of the organizations. Because planning is done, they say okay, these are the set of activities. Managers will feel that okay, my subordinate is going to do, and that's where the functions of control, leading, and reporting is also important. Unless otherwise, manager has to look into it whether the subordinates are actually delivering or doing it. Then it is impossible to ensure that they are actually doing their part of the job. So it is actually planning boosts a false sense of security. You feel that there are huge number of people engaged, so I don't need to worry about it. Even if I fail to contribute, somehow my organization will succeed. So it is not possible. So planning sometimes boosts a false sense of security. Okay, these are the references, and today we discussed about the characteristics, nature, and scope, and some of the principles of planning. Okay, thank you.